Welcome to the most comprehensive college football talk you'll find anywhere on the web as we offer up the latest on key injuries, odds, trends, and picks for the best week of the season to date in college football week 9. Many key matchups to discuss as the OFN on PSN starts now. All right, thanks for tuning in to the Ourlads Football Radio Network as we preview Week 9 in college football. For your NFL fans, you can check out our Week 8 NFL Preview podcast on demand from yesterday on the Ourlads.com Ourlads Football Network page. Don't forget, all our shows are available on demand, also on our YouTube page and our iTunes page under Prime Sports Network. All right, we've got a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. We're going to go conference by conference. And again, this is definitely, we've talked a lot over the past several weeks about, it hasn't really been a great season so far of matchups. Seems to be one or two games that are okay. Even last week, the two games that were building up, especially the Michigan-Penn State game. Remember, they kept building it up if you were watching college football all day. Oh, it's great Michigan-Penn State game. It's going to be so great. And, it really, it was great for us, not as Michigan fans, but to predict that Penn State would win easy, and they did. And same thing with Notre Dame. And but the Michigan-Penn State game really wasn't as good as many had hoped, I guess it would be. But I don't know. You got to build it up. You're hoping. But forget Michigan right now. They've got nothing at quarterback. We've said that all season. We've said it for 2 seasons. And Penn State right now, our national championship pick all season. So they've got the big game coming up that we're going to get to in a little while. Huge stretch, 3 weeks. So the game last week was a must-win against Michigan. And then Notre Dame, really, I think the Notre Dame winning the way that they did was the big thing. I didn't expect them to blow out USC. But that was huge. And we'll talk more, of course, about those two teams because they are both in big games again this week. But let's talk about the ACC because tonight Florida State is taking on Boston College. So that game is going to go off in a little while. Florida State's a 4-point favorite. And Dan Shanka profiled Harold Landry, his top-rated outside linebacker prospect for the 2018 NFL Draft, senior prospect. So that's available on demand. We did that on Monday. And it's that Boston College defense with Landry that should really cause problems for that weak offensive line for Florida State. They have no running game. They've got still a very green quarterback with okay, now he's got a little bit of experience, but he lost the game last week. He couldn't hold on to the ball, and then Louisville marches down the field and beats him. Just to show you how Florida State hasn't been able to live up, even at this point in the season, to what most people think they should be doing. They haven't covered a spread all year. So no matter what happens every single week, they let everybody down. And they've beaten BC 7 straight times. You know what? That could end. Why not? Look at BC the way they're playing right now. See, unlike Florida State, BCU is outplaying the experts. They've covered 5 straight games. They've won back-to-back road games against what was a hot Virginia team. They beat Louisville, who just beat Florida State at Florida State. BC gets home against Florida State. They get him at Chestnut Hill at night. And I'm getting 4. I'm taking Boston College. All right, now tomorrow, Georgia Tech and Clemson. So this is a huge game for both teams. Clemson coming off the loss against Syracuse. And really just kind of what we wanted. Remember we said, a few weeks ago when we were going over our futures plays. And because Clemson, they didn't start off that poorly as a future play. I think they started off something like 14-1. As a future team. And obviously we wanted to, even though we picked them last year to win the championship, we were taking a wait-and-see approach with this year's team because it's so hard to repeat. But then they dropped all the way down to 3-1 a few weeks ago. And we were like, well, there's no way we're touching them now. But we always talk about the fact that every team has a bad week, and a lot of times these teams that win national championships lose at least one time. So the chances are Clemson will lose, and when they do, that's when we'll take them, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to definitely put Clemson into our future plays this week at 10-1. So again, they're 10-1 to win the national championship. We're going to post our futures report, by the way, both for the NFL and college football. We're going to do that by tomorrow morning before the 12 o'clock game. So that'll be available. You'll see Clemson added to our list. And we'll talk more about that on probably on Monday's show, because we're going to start to get into a lot of, especially with the NFL being right about midseason, we're going to start getting into some midseason reports, taking a look, predictions and stuff. And so we'll start getting more detailed and look at these futures and see what we've done to date and exactly what we think about the rest of the season ahead. So, yeah, Clemson is definitely back on board now as a future play for us at 10-1, right where we want them. But I do think Georgia Tech is a good play tomorrow. Sure, I think Clemson could have the game that, they lose, they get the bye, they get Bryant back, and they're now going to go out and they're just going to lay it all out on Georgia Tech. Okay, I can see that. No question about it. But right now, remember we said this last week, just really like this Georgia Tech team. This is a really good Paul Johnson Georgia Tech team, thanks to Taekwon Marshall. He's got a quarterback to run his offense, 163 yards rushing against a good Wake Forest defense last week. He's got Kervonte Benson as well. So between Marshall and Benson, the good thing for Clemson is, and the reason this is going to be tough for Georgia Tech is because Clemson had an extra week to prepare. And that is the best way to beat Georgia Tech. When you're going up against that Paul Johnson triple option and you have the extra week to prepare, that's not a good thing for Georgia Tech. So I can definitely see how this would be a dangerous situation for Georgia Tech. But they have covered every game this year. I like the way they're playing. They lose to Miami by 1 point. They lose to Tennessee by 1 point. So those are their losses. They've lost 2 games by total of 2 points. So I'm going to go ahead and take Georgia Tech in 15. But I'm a little bit. This is one of those games, because of how much I respect the Clemson program, that I'm definitely wary of Clemson coming out strong. And if they do, Georgia Tech's in big trouble because they won't be able to come back. All right, now the other games we like in the ACC, we're going to go with Virginia +3 at Pitt. Yeah, Pitt won last week. Okay, nice. They beat Duke and Darren Hall. That's the thing we don't know is Darren Hall came from nowhere, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns against Duke. This is a junior who's done nothing for a couple of years. But Virginia, they have a pretty good group of defenders. We've talked a lot about their guys, including Kaiser this year. They held A.J. Dillon, the BC running back who will rush tonight, who had 272 yards rushing against Louisville. They held Dillon to just 89 rushing yards last week. And so if Virginia can do the same thing against Darren Hall, even better for Virginia, because Pitt doesn't have a quarterback situation right now. Their passing offense is not good at this point with Brown out for the year. So far, the backups haven't produced. If Virginia wins this game, they'll be bowl eligible, by the way, for the first time since 2011. So this is a significant game. By the way, they're 2-0 on the road this year, too. So keep that in mind. Mendenhall has them playing well on the road. So I'll take Virginia in 3 points. Virginia's the better team, and I'm getting 3 points. I'll take them. Miami's a 20-point favorite at North Carolina, and the Tar Heels have been banged up all season. You knew it was going to be a rebuilding year with Trubisky and company gone, but this bad? Well, they're this bad because of the injuries as well. So, and now they come into this game with their leading rusher, the lone bright spot of the season. Michael Carter's out for the game. Now, they do have Jordan Brown, who's a pretty decent number 2 back, but still, this has just been a terrible year for North Carolina. And even though Miami's been winning a lot of close games, North Carolina's handled them the last couple of years. I'm sure Miami would like to get this, get this win out of the way. I'm leaning towards taking Miami. It's a lot of points. I'm a little bit worried about that. But North Carolina is terrible. The other thing I'm a little bit concerned with is the look-ahead situation with Miami facing Virginia Tech and Notre Dame over the next couple of weeks. But Miami's definitely the play if you're going to take this one. Wake Forest and Louisville. And the Deacons, look, we've talked about them all season. Clausen has got this team playing solid football. Even when they lose, they're in these close games. They're a 3-point dog against Louisville at home. I think you look at this game easily and you go, come on, Louisville, 3 points? How would I not take Louisville? And I understand that. But I'm definitely leaning towards Wake Forest in this game. I think they're in a situation, Wake Forest, where they've had a nice season and they've had these close games that I've mentioned, and I just think that they're kind of due for a nice win that they can hold their hat on for the season. Being competitive against Clemson, Florida State, and Georgia Tech in consecutive weeks. Uh, I think they're due for a breakthrough. Don't think they'll get it next week at South Bend. Maybe they can get it against North Carolina State, but no matter how good North Carolina State is, unless North Carolina State doesn't lose another game till then, I'm not sure many people will really consider that a big marquee win this season for Wake Forest, but this would be. So I think this is a good opportunity for Wake. And by the way, it's their only home game since the Florida State game on September 30th, and they won't have another home game until November 18th against North Carolina State. So this is a significant game for Wake Forest, being at home and not having a lot of home games, before or after. And Duke is at Virginia Tech. Another game that I'm going to go ahead and take the dog in this one, taking Duke plus the 16. We mentioned Virginia Tech has Miami next week. Not sure what the look ahead will be like, but it's possible. But I like the fact that a couple of things. First of all, this series has been very close. When these two teams get together, you get a lot of close games. The last 4 years, the games have been decided by a total of 9 points. All right. I mean, that's pretty low. Throw in the fact that you're getting 16 if you're Duke, and you get this Duke team that, yes, they haven't been playing all that well recently. I completely get that. But if you look at them over the last 3 weeks, they lose by 7 to Virginia, 7 to Florida State, 7 to Pittsburgh. So they've been hanging in there. And I think if they can probably just hang in there again one more week, then there'll be a good play here. And the 16, I don't think is crazy. All right, now the North Carolina State game is another big one. Now it's not an ACC game because Notre Dame is an independent, but North Carolina State. We talked about the Wolfpack with Anthony Giglio, sports writer for the News and Observer. That's available on demand. So a little bit more detail about the game if you want to listen to that. NC State beat Notre Dame last year 10-3. Just an ugly game in the rain. You've got the 6th-ranked rushing defense at NC State and all those big defensive linemen led by Bradley Chubb, who's Dan Shonka's #1 senior-rated defensive end coming out for the 2018 draft, going up against that 6th-ranked rushing offense for Notre Dame with Wimbush and Adams. You have a Notre Dame team, too, with, the thing that we haven't talked a lot about this season, but you should probably keep an eye on, is the great job Mike Elko has done at Notre Dame. Defensive coordinator who was terrific for Wake Forest, comes over to Notre Dame. Brian Kelly, great hire. And it's not just Notre Dame's rushing offense, it's that defense. Elko has the defense playing great defense, the running game doing their job. That formula is working. Notre Dame has won 5 straight up and against the spread. We've liked them during this streak. You know that. We liked them last week. 7.5 point spread here. The reason we're going to go with North Carolina State in this game has really only to do with the fact, as I always say, and as a reminder for new listeners, I always say this: if I get a game that I think can go either way, and I got a spread like this, I'm going with the dog. So I'm taking the Wolfpack plus the 8. The money line is not a crazy idea. I kind of like Notre Dame to win this game, though, but a close game, and we'll see about next week. But I don't know. I do get the feeling that NC State's got a shot here. I really do. I think I give them a better chance to win this week than next week because Clemson's better than they are. Even though it's going to be in North Carolina State, I just told you I'm taking Clemson to win the national championship, or at least I'm taking them with their futures. So I think, and I don't see North Carolina State losing 2 straight here. I think they've had such a good season that they'll find a way to go 1-1 here. And I think the best chance is to win this game. So this is a good game. Very good game. Can go either way, which is why I said I like NC State. They've won 4 straight road games. This is a good one. So looking forward to this one at Notre Dame. All right, now let's move out of the ACC to the Big Ten and Penn State, Ohio State. Boy, I've talked enough about this game over the last week. And my preseason national champion, Penn State Nittany Lions. We may have a situation for the first time since I've been saying that beginning of the season that there's a hiccup in the road because it's just asking way too much for Penn State to go undefeated. It just is. We talked in depth about this last week. If they lose to Ohio State, can they still find a way to win the national championship? Well, yes, they can. They could find a way to get to the playoffs as long as they don't lose another game. See, there's a couple of ways they can do it. One is, of course, if Ohio State loses if they beat Penn State. They either lose next week at Iowa, at home against Michigan State, who, by the way, when those two teams have gotten together, it's been a very tough series recently. Matter of fact, I think this is the series. Just trying to look quickly if I see it here. I think this is the series where the road team has actually come out ahead quite a bit recently. And the road team will be Michigan State. So trust me, that could be a Michigan State win. And then you got the game at Michigan at the end of the season. There's no way John O'Korn is going to be the quarterback of Michigan at the end of the season. Either Spade comes back or Harbaugh will finally wake up and get rid of O'Korn and let Peters or maybe even take the red shirt off of McCaffrey, which I kind of doubt, but you never know. If he wants to beat Ohio State, which he does, he may have to do that. But so someone else will be a quarterback in that game, and that'll give Michigan a real chance to beat Ohio State. So that's the one way Penn State can do it. The other way is don't lose another game and do what Ohio State did. Sneak in the back door. Don't play in the championship game. Hope that Ohio State beats Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, and they invite 2 Big Ten teams to the playoffs. Because after this, look, if Penn State were to lose to Ohio State, they're not losing to Michigan State next week, and they're not losing another game the rest of the season because they end the season with Rutgers, Nebraska, Maryland. So if they lose to Ohio State, they're gonna run the table, and then they're gonna sit and wait. And they will have a chance, a serious chance, if Ohio State wins the division and then the Big Ten championship to get in with Ohio State into the playoffs. So I still think that would be a great opportunity for them. But hey, you know what? Take care of business on Saturday. And I think they can do it. They're a 7-point dog that's showing no respect once again. The line should be 3 or 4. And Ohio State, by the way, is 6-13-1 against the spread their last 20 as a home favorite. You've got 2 very good rush defensive teams, and Ohio State wants to run because they can't pass. So, see, that's where Penn State's better than Ohio State. And why I think Penn State's better than Ohio State. Because Penn State is a complete team. Penn State can throw the ball. Okay, they've got good receivers. They've got one of the best, if not the best, tight end in college football. They have a quarterback that can throw the ball. They've got the best player in college football in Barkley. And they've got a good defense. Ohio State has a good defense. Ohio State can run the ball with freshmen J.K. Dobbins and Barrett and Weber, but they can't pass the ball. They're a one-dimensional team. But they're home here. And you could say, they got revenge too. And it's like revenge. I mean, they always beat Penn State. What do you mean revenge? They lose one game and it's revenge? I don't believe in that kind of revenge, okay? So we'll see. Look, I love the fact that they're getting 7. It's very hard, though, to go in Ohio State and win. But, look, they're the underdog. I like that. You know which way I'm going. I'm taking Penn State. Another big game in the Big Ten is Michigan State and Northwestern because Michigan State's 6-1. And they would like to put their name in the ring as far as an opportunity to surprise everybody and play in the Big Ten championship game. That's not going to happen. Sooner or later, the luck is going to run out. They've had a lot of close games. Their last 4 wins have been decided by 8 points or less. They're doing it mainly with defense, because they're running the ball a little bit, but if they can't run the ball, they don't do anything. And Northwestern has a pretty good rush defense. I'm a big Pat Fitzgerald fan. If listening to me over the years, Jackson, best running back on the field on Saturday in that game. By the way, Michigan State after this, Penn State at home. as I mentioned, and then at Ohio State. So if they lose this game, you could be looking at a team on a 3-game losing streak. It's very possible. Even though, I mean, I could see Ohio State beating Penn State, Northwestern beating Michigan State, Penn State beating Michigan State next week, and then Michigan State beating Ohio State after that. That I can clearly see. I hope that's not how Penn State has to do it. But, the other thing is I could also see Penn State beating Ohio State and then Michigan State beating Penn State next week, because it's just really tough for Penn State to win all 3 of these games in 3 consecutive weeks. For Northwestern, though, I think there's a good chance for them to win this game. They're getting 3. Like I said, I think you're playing with fire when you're a team like Michigan State, when you're overachieving and you keep playing in these close games. Sooner or later, something's going to happen, and it's just something's going to happen. And that's why I'm taking Northwestern here. And you never know. Maybe it's a close enough game they can actually lose and cover. By the way, the road team, if you want to go with Michigan State, has won 5 straight in that series. The other games I like in this conference, now I'm a little bit hesitant on taking Rutgers in this spot, because when they're in this spot, they usually get blown out. But when they cover, they usually cover in all the other type of games. The games where the spread is like a normal kind of underdog spread. 9 against Purdue, or I think they were like a 1-2-point dog against Illinois, 11 against Nebraska, that kind of stuff that they've been able to cover. But when they're a heavy dog, that's when they have a bit of a problem, like the Ohio State game. But this Michigan team, I've told you, and come on, they got nothing as far as passing. And I know it's Rutgers. I get that. I'm not saying Rutgers is going to win this game or it's going to be close, but 24 points for a team that can't move the football very effectively through the air. And I would say you're looking at a game that, unless Rutgers just hands the ball over, turns it over, Michigan gets a couple of easy touchdowns, I can see Rutgers covering this game. I'm not sold on the fact I'm going to take Rutgers, but keep in mind, and this is going to be a theme, and this is something I've talked about before. I talked about it last week about the Penn State Michigan revenge spot. Same thing here. Not as much, because Rutgers is not Penn State. But last year, Michigan beat Rutgers 78-0. So that's something I got to believe Rutgers is going to be kind of motivated for. They've covered, Rutgers has won 2 straight. They've covered 4 to 5. Michigan's only won 1 out of their last 3, beating Indiana in overtime. And they're 1-4-1 against the spread in their last 6. So that's why I'm leaning towards taking Rutgers plus 24. Wisconsin, we're going to take Wisconsin minus 26 at Illinois, because, Wisconsin is one of our sleeper national championship teams from a month ago. I think we had them at 33-1. And Illinois is terrible. And their best player, Epstein, the running back, is out for the season. Wisconsin, meanwhile, get this. They're 13-1 straight up and 12-2 against the spread in their last 14 road games. How about that? So we'll take Wisconsin minus 26. Iowa, minus 7 against Minnesota. Minnesota has got a terrible passing team. It's embarrassingly bad. PJ Fleck's got to get a quarterback there. And because of that, I like Iowa minus the 7. Both teams have dropped 3 out of 4, but Iowa's a better team right now. And by the way, this is only the second road game since September 10th for the Gophers, so I like Iowa minus 7. I also really like Purdue minus 5 against Nebraska. I've been trashing Nebraska all year, and that's been a good thing for me. Purdue, meanwhile, gets running back Tario Fuller back. He's expected to return after being out since week 3. When he left, he was the leading rusher, 261 yards in his first 3 games. He is still the number 1 rusher. That's how bad Purdue misses him. So he's supposed to come back. Nebraska, meanwhile, we've talked about how they missed Trey Bryant most of the season, and he's officially out for the year. They're number 1 running back. So, yeah, Purdue's a better team than Nebraska right now. They're home. They're favored by 5. And by the way, they're 2-0 straight up and against the spread this year, Purdue, as a home favorite so far under Coach Brom. We'll take Purdue minus the 5. Let's go to the Big 12. Big game between TCU and Iowa State. And we had Tommy Birch on the program a couple of days ago from the Des Moines Register, sports writer covering Cyclones football. So there's that on demand if you want to listen a little bit about that. Talked about the game also. But Iowa State 3-0 straight up against the spread, last three, including road wins at Oklahoma and Texas Tech. That's since Kemp has taken over at quarterback. So we've talked about this. So this Iowa State team under Matt Campbell a lot over the past few weeks on this network. Love what they're doing. We've also mentioned that we feel pretty strongly that as much as we respect what Patterson and TCU is doing this year, and they're not doing it with smoke and mirrors. I mean, they're the best team in the Big 12 right now. They're going to lose. They're not that good. Whether that happens this week or not, I don't know. But time's running out on TCU. I don't think that a Big 12 team, maybe Oklahoma can do it. I don't think TCU can do it because they don't have a non-conference big win like Oklahoma does. I think Oklahoma is the only team right now in the Big 12 that can get to the playoffs unless TCU goes undefeated. And again, I don't think that can happen because they're going to have to go to Oklahoma in a couple of weeks. So this is a big test, though, for TCU and Iowa State, to tell you the truth, but especially for TCU, because if you take a look at their schedule, they've had they've played some decent teams, but they've had one really tough game. That was at Oklahoma State, and they came up big. A matter of fact, they've won all three of their road games this year, winning and covering them. And well, they're undefeated, of course, so naturally. And they've won and covered their last 5 road games overall. So they've done a good job on the road. They've also beaten Iowa State 4 straight years by a 141-44 margin. So they've buried the Cyclones. And whether they have their number or not, we'll see. Or this is a completely different Iowa State team. That could also come into play. TCU is favored by 7 in this spot. We're going to go ahead and take Iowa State. And this could be a good opportunity to run with the money line as well. And you know what? If Iowa State does win this game, then there is a chance the Cyclones, because their only loss of the season, well, their only loss, they only have one loss in the Big 12 was the Texas loss, and it just, I'm not going to say that Iowa State would win the Big 12. Because next week they got to go to West Virginia, and that would not be easy if they were to beat TCU for 4 wins in a row, have to go to Morgantown. That'd probably be a loss. And then after that at home against Oklahoma State. I'm just saying it would be kind of fun to talk about it. And you know what? Because I don't think they're going to win the Big 12, even if they win this game, I think Iowa State, I think it'd be nice if they can go ahead and get it done. I don't know if they can, but I respect what they're doing enough. Their confidence is sky high that I think this game is going to go down to the wire. And if TCU does win and cover, I think it'll be a pretty small number. All right, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. Now, this game is another good Big 12 game. Oklahoma State favored by 7.5. They've got the Cowboys have the Sooners next week, by the way. Keep that in mind. Both teams, by the way, lost to TCU this year. West Virginia also lost opening day to Virginia Tech. I like West Virginia in this spot. Now, I don't know if they're going to win the game. Taking a chance on the money line, that's a possibility. But I really love what Will Grier's done this year, the former Florida quarterback. That I'm sure Florida would be that much better if they had him. But Grier, 26-5 touchdown to interception ratio. You got Justin Crawford, who's got over 600 yards rushing. You have David Stills. We've talked about him on this network having an incredible season with 15 touchdowns. And Gary Jennings got 56 receptions. Matter of fact, Sills and Jennings have combined for over 700 yards. Combined for over 1,400 yards receiving. So this is a dangerous West Virginia team. It's in Morgantown. Oklahoma State coming off a real close, tough win against Texas in overtime last week. Yeah, and with Oklahoma coming up next week, I like West Virginia. May not be a bad upset spot either. Baylor and Texas. Now, Baylor, we've mentioned this a few weeks ago that we think that Baylor is going to upset somebody at some point. Maybe this is a good spot because they've come close a few times, especially at home. Matter of fact, they've lost all 4 of their home games this year by a total of, or by an average of 5 points per game. So they're getting 8 here. And Texas, with Ellinger, the quarterback, out with a concussion, you got Buechele, the backup's dealing with an ankle injury, so he's not 100%. If for any reason they got to go to Gerard Hurd, the number 3 quarterback, they're in big trouble because I don't care what anybody at Texas says. He's not very good. You also have to consider Texas has got to be emotionally drained. After they had the Kansas State win in overtime. then the Oklahoma rivalry loss, which went down in the last second, followed by the Oklahoma State overtime loss in consecutive weeks. I mean, they have to be emotionally drained. And you got a Baylor team dying for a win at home, getting 8. You know what? Baylor probably a pretty good play for the money line this week. And finally, Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield. I like them, even though it's 19. I think they're going to bury Texas Tech. I think they're kind of due for like a really big, convincing win. They had a nice win over Kansas State last week. I am a little bit worried about getting Oklahoma State next week in the look ahead, considering the game last week was a tough one. So there's that. But I don't know. I just kind of think that because if you take a look at Oklahoma, the last 4 games for the Sooners have been decided by 8 points or less. Really. So on one hand, you can say, well, maybe Oklahoma isn't that good after all. And I don't know how good they are. But I just think they're overdue for a big win. And Texas Tech has dropped 3 out of 4. So all the momentum that the Red Raiders had earlier this season has gone out the window after last week. And that was a terrible performance, by the way, against Iowa State. So I'll take Oklahoma minus the 19 in that one. Let's move on to the SEC, Georgia and Florida. Georgia favored by 13. It's a big number in this rivalry, but why not? Georgia, another team that was a kind of a mini sleeper future play from us about a month ago. No longer anything close to a sleeper. But Georgia, the 3rd-ranked total defensive team in college football. Kirby Smart's got this team playing great. We've talked about that all season. And they're going up against the 102nd ranked team in total offense, Florida. So there you go. I mean, do I have to say anything else other than this? Florida has beaten Georgia 3 straight years by an 89-33 margin. So like I said with Penn State against Michigan last week, you get a situation where seniors have never beaten a team in a rivalry game. Yeah, those Georgia seniors are going to be up for this one. And because of that, and because of the way Florida's handled them as well, I'm not afraid to give the 13. All right, other games I like in the SEC, South Carolina 7-point over Vanderbilt. Bowl eligible if South Carolina wins this game. It's homecoming. They've won 8 straight versus the Commodores. Commodores have lost 4 straight by a 199-73 margin. So we'll take South Carolina by 7. Texas A&M is getting 2 at home against Mississippi State. This is one of those strange lines for me. I don't know why they're getting 2. This is I understand this is kind of like an even matchup. I get that. But the Aggies are the home team. And here's the Texas A&M team since the UCLA loss. They're 4-0-1 against the spread. So maybe right there, that should be an indication that, I mean, you're not giving them any respect every week. They keep beating the number, but still no respect for a team that lost to Alabama by 8. Mississippi State, meanwhile, this is their 3rd SEC road game. They lost their first 2 against Auburn and Georgia by 80-13 margin. They're 1-5 in their last 6 SEC road games. Texas A&M coming off a bye to prepare for this game, and the home team in this series has won 4 straight. Aggies all the way. Kentucky, we also like them against Tennessee -5 because Tennessee is the joke right now. We even talked last year a lot about while they were having an incredible run to start the season, that Butch Jones was the wrong guy for the job. Butch Jones is going to get fired. It's just a matter of weeks. Maybe he'll get fired after this game. Because Tennessee has won 5 straight in the series and 31 of 32 all time. So they've dominated this series, but Kentucky's going to win this game because Tennessee's a terrible team right now. They have no offense. They have no quarterback play. And now the only good player on offense, their running back John Kelly, suspended because of pot possession. That's really nice. So this team is dead, Tennessee. Great opportunity for Kentucky to get a win in this rivalry, and they should. I mean, if they can't figure out a way to beat Tennessee, Mark Stoops, boy, I don't know what to tell you. So Kentucky -5 is the way to go. I'm also going to take Missouri -12 over UConn. This is obviously UConn from the AAC, but Missouri proved last week against Idaho that you get them out of the SEC, and you're not showing them any respect with these lines. They beat Idaho by 47. And by the way, as much as we've trashed Missouri this year, they've actually started to play a lot better over the last 3 games. They were tough against Kentucky, then they were tough against Georgia, then they blew out Idaho. Drew Lock, the quarterback, in his last 3 starts has thrown for over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, 2 picks. Now, Edsall has got UConn starting to play better, and it's a matter of time. He's going to do a good job rebuilding this program. And beat anybody, but okay, they look better than they did earlier this season. But this is Missouri. This is an SEC team. I don't think you got to worry about giving 12 in this spot, especially since Missouri's won 2 games. I mean, Missouri still has a chance to go to a bowl. If you take a look at it, and you take a look at Missouri's schedule the rest of the season, you win this game, you get to 3 wins, so you got to win 3 out of the next 4. Now you get the next 2 at home. So if you split that, then you got to win the last 2 road games, and the last 2 road games are at Vanderbilt and Arkansas. So Missouri can get to a bowl, and but they got to win this game. And one more note in the SEC: Arkansas, Ole Miss, both quarterbacks out. Austin Allen for Arkansas still out. Shea Patterson injured last week against LSU, out for the year. All right, Pac-12, and I think that clearly the best game of the week in this conference is USC at Arizona State, and this is also the game I love the most. Another game where a team is not getting any respect. You have Arizona State, who we've talked a lot about the last couple of weeks. We've talked about the fact that they've been competitive in losses to San Diego State, Texas Tech, and Stanford. Then they beat Oregon with Justin Herbert. Then they beat Washington, and then when they weren't getting any respect last week, and of course we took them in the outright upset, 17-point dog at Washington. We followed that up by taking them at Utah outright upset, and they won. And they not only beat Utah, they beat them by 20. Still no respect. They're getting 4 to a USC team that has not shown any respect to the experts. They haven't covered a game in 6 games. And they've got, we talked about the injuries last week going into the Notre Dame game. They're still a banged up defensive line. Even their top corner, Iman Marshall's banged up, may not play. The Pac-12 sack leader, Christian Rector's got a broken hand. He's out for a couple of weeks. I'm not getting it. I really am not getting the lack of respect for Arizona State here. I'm all over the Sun Devils +4. Josh Rosen gets a chance in a big spot at Washington. This might be his last big chance because he's probably going to graduate. He's probably going to leave UCLA at the end of this year. But look, UCLA, you know the way we think about them, and Jim Mora on the road or in these spots. They're 0-3 straight up and against the spread on the road this year. They've lost 7 straight road games. They can beat the Oregons of the world with backup quarterbacks, but they're not going to beat Washington unless Josh Rosen plays the game of his life. Not going to say he can't, but he's going to have to. I mean, Washington should destroy UCLA in this game. Coming off a bye and a loss, even though it's 17, Washington should cruise in this one. Now, the other game that's going to be a really good one, unfortunately, I don't think this one's on TV except the Pac-12 network. We talked to Anthony Gimino the other day, who covers the Wildcats for allsportstucson.com, and we did it because Khalil Tate, we've been high on him, as you know, listening to us the last few weeks. This kid's been outstanding since he's taken over. They've won 3 games, scoring 137 points in the process. Now, Washington State's having a great year. They're favored by 3 on the road in this one. But here's another revenge spot. The Cougars beat the Wildcats 69-7 last year. We like Arizona here. I'm just going to keep riding Khalil Tate until they lose. This is a good one. Not a lot of people are going to watch it unless you're out west or you got the Pac-12 network, which not a lot of people do. But trust me, it should be a good one. Now, Utah-Oregon. Keep in mind in this game, Utah is a 3.5-point favorite at Oregon. Justin Herbert could return. So now I don't know if that's going to be enough for me to stay away from Utah, because Utah's just that. I mean, if Herbert doesn't play, I'm all over Utah because Oregon's just a terrible team without Herbert. I mean, the quarterback situation, they've been terrible. Uh, and matter of fact, if you look at it, Oregon started the season, don't forget, really playing well. He was injured in the Week 5 win against Cal, and he started off 4-1, and everything was going great for Oregon. And then what happened? Herbert gets injured, and they've lost 3 straight, and he looked pretty bad doing it. So now, but still, how healthy can he be if he plays? That's the other thing. And Utah, all of a sudden, they're kind of in a little bit of a, they've had some issues lately. I'm not saying bad issues. They've lost. Now they've lost by 3 to Stanford, 1 to USC, and a 2-point failed conversion attempt at the end of the game, and then the Arizona State game last week. Maybe those 2 losses before that caught up to them. Maybe with the young Tyler Huntley coming back to quarterback, sometimes that can actually work against you, which is why maybe it works against Oregon with Herbert. The road team has won 3 straight in this series, so keep that in mind. So anyway, I'm kind of leaning towards Utah, and I'm also going to take Cal 4-point dog at Colorado. Both teams have lost 4 to 5, but just like this Cal team this year, whereas Colorado, they had their moment of glory last year. This is a rebuilding year for Colorado. They're 1-6 against the spread in their last 7 for a reason, but I kind of think Cal may not be a bad play here, getting the 4. All right, now let's see if we can zip through the rest of the games in the AAC. Memphis leads the West of the AAC by a half game over SMU. They play SMU in a few weeks at home. That could decide the division. They've had back-to-back wins over Navy and Houston, 2 top teams in this division. Mike Norwell is doing a really good job there in year 2. And the Tigers are going to face Tulane. This game's tonight. Willie Fritz, we like Fritz, that. They're a 10.5-point favorite in this game. I'm going to stay away from this game, but Memphis is probably the play if you want to go with the team because, again, I think they're playing well. They're the better team right now, plus they're at home. But I'll stay away from this game. And Memphis, by the way, has won 10 straight against Tulane. Also tonight, SMU hosting Tulsa. We like the Mustangs in this game as a 9-point favorite. SMU is 7-1 straight up and against the spread as a home favorite under Chad Morris. This is his 3rd year. He's really good in this spot. Tulsa's not a good team this year, and they have beaten SMU 3 straight years, so good chance for SMU to get some revenge here tonight. Tomorrow in the AAC, South Florida. We like them a lot in this game. They're only an 11-point favorite over Houston. I'm kind of surprised that line is so low. Houston, name recognition, that's I think the reason why it's only 11, because South Florida has been beating everybody up in this conference in this spot. They've won these 3 home games in the AAC, 123 to 33. So they have just been annihilating teams over their last 3 home games. No reason for me to think that they won't continue to do that tomorrow against Houston. Also, in the Conference USA, FAU and Lane Kiffin. Now, Lane Kiffin, the reason he took this job over FAU was very strategic. Let me go to a conference where my abilities can dwarf the other coaches that I'm going up against. I mean, Lane Kiffin may not be ready to be an NFL coach right now, may not be ready to be a big-time college coach yet. But he's been there. He's done that. He's more than qualified at the Conference USA level, and it's starting to show. Right now, it looks like FAU and Marshall are going to battle it out for the Eastern Division of the Conference USA, and they play next Friday night in Boca. I expect that game to be for all the marbles in the East. FAU has won 3 straight by 155 to 79. Running back Devin Singletary, 715 yards rushing in his last 5 games with 13 touchdowns. So FAU's on a roll. They're favored by 7 at Western Kentucky. Last year's dominant team doesn't have Jeff Brom. They haven't been the same team all season. And yes, they've won 4 straight, but they've won those 4 games over teams with a combined 5-25 record. By the way, another revenge spot. FAU lost last year to Western Kentucky, 52-3. We'll take the Owls minus the 7. And then we'll also take Marshall minus 17 against FIU. Marshall's won their last 5 by a 146-37 margin. Only lost this season to NC State on the road. FIU, meanwhile, has lost on the road to Middle Tennessee by 20 and Central Florida by 44. Also, in the Conference USA, we're going with North Texas minus 11 against Old Dominion. North Texas is tied for first in the West with Southern Miss. They beat Southern Miss by 15. And speaking of Southern Miss, they're a 13-point favorite at home against UAB. UAB 0-3 straight up, 1-2 against the spread on the road. So I'm not sure that's a good spot to take the Blazers, who did what we thought they could do last week, and that was get upset by winless Charlotte. Tough blow for the Blazer program. Everything had been going well for them at that point, but unfortunately, everything came to an end last week. All right, so that was the Conference USA. Mountain West Conference, Boise State favored by 8 against Utah State. We like the Broncos in that one. They're tied for first in the Mountain with Colorado State. They are 3-0 against the spread on the road this year. Matter of fact, they only lost on the road this year in overtime at Washington State. So they're starting to build up some wins. They're still not the Boise State team, for the program from a couple years ago. But if Colorado State keeps struggling, maybe Boise has a chance to get to the Mountain West Conference Championship game this year. Because Boise is playing a little bit better right now. And Colorado State hasn't been playing all that well, but Colorado State does get Boise at home on November 11th, so I still think Colorado State's a team to beat there, but we still have a few weeks to go to kind of determine it. Just don't think Boise's got enough firepower on offense, but I do like them in this spot, favored by 8 at Utah State. Speaking of Colorado State, they're a 10.5-point favorite at home against Air Force. They have only won by 5 combined points the Rams have in their last 2 games, so I'm kind of thinking of staying away from this game. Air Force has also only won by a combined 7 points over their last 2 games. The home team in this series has won 5 straight. Colorado State's the better team, but just a little bit surprised that Colorado State hasn't played better lately. I do like Wyoming getting 2 at home against New Mexico. Josh Allen should be able to win this game. They're 1 game behind Boise after losing to them last week. They actually had a chance to beat Boise early in that game, but then it was all Boise late. Wyoming has covered 4 straight games. They are dealing with some defensive line injuries, and New Mexico has beaten Wyoming 3 straight times. But keep in mind, New Mexico is a road favorite in this game, and they're a road favorite for only the 5th time in Bob Davies' 6-year career with the Lobos. And the only other time they were a road favorite this year, they lost to Fresno State 38-0. So we're going to take Wyoming in this spot plus the 2 at home. And, of course, we're taking Fresno, favored by 20 against UNLV. We've been all over Fresno, as you know, for the last few weeks. And they went ahead and they pulled it out for us last week as an upset over San Diego State. They now have a 2-game lead over the Aztecs. So it looks like Fresno State will play in the championship game this year. They are 6-0-1 against the spread on the season, so we're just going to keep riding them. Why not? Why shouldn't we? Especially against a UNLV team that may not have their starting quarterback in this game. Armani Rogers is banged up, so he may not be able to play, and even if he does, he's not going to be 100%. Fresno's the home team. They should destroy UNLV in this spot as long as they do not take UNLV for granted. And then finally, 2 more conferences to go in the MAC. Eastern Michigan lost yet another close game, their 6th straight game. They lose last night against Northern Illinois, and they led the game by 14, and they blew it because they've been blowing every game this year late. They've lost 6 straight games by a total of 24 points. That's 4 points per game. So now they must win their last 4 for bowl eligibility, which they could do because the games that they're going to be playing are all winnable games, but they put themselves in a really tough spot. Northern Illinois tied for first in the West with Toledo, who also won last night against Ball State. Akron's a 5.5-point favorite against Buffalo. Akron is tied with Ohio in the East Division of the MAC, and they're going to take on Miami on Tuesday. Ohio will. So no Ohio on Saturday. They got the Tuesday game with Miami. Miami in third, by the way, behind Akron and Ohio. Buffalo, meanwhile, gets quarterback Tyree Jackson back, possibly, with Drew Anderson out for the year. The home team has won 6 straight in this series. And finally, in the Sun Belt, even though we did a good job taking New Mexico State a lot earlier this year, we're going to go with Arkansas State here. And I don't mind going with Arkansas State here because I've taken Arkansas State a lot over the last few years for this very reason. They are 18-1 straight up in their last 19, 13-2 against the spread in their last 15 when they play Sun Belt teams. All right? And they're only giving 3 in this spot. And they've won all 3 of their games in the Sun Belt this year by a 161-85 margin. So Justice Hansen, the quarterback at Arkansas State, could be the difference maker in the entire conference. Blake Anderson is doing a very good job with this program. And Arkansas State, I'm sorry, I mean, New Mexico State's a nice story, but they're not, to me, this is just a completely level difference. Sort of like, when they lost New Mexico State, when we've seen them go up against the top teams like Appalachian State and Troy. Look, 3 is a sign of respect, and that's nice. But Arkansas State's just a better team. And finally, Appalachian State at UMass, favored by 4.5. We're actually taking the Minutemen, and there's a few reasons why. Appalachian State, in their wins, they have beaten Texas State, New Mexico State, Idaho, and Coastal Carolina by a total of 32 points. Okay? But those are FBS wins. And covered just one of those games. And the one they covered, Mexico State, that game they were trailing late and needed a couple late touchdowns to cover. I think the touchdown they scored late was like really late. And Texas State and Coastal Carolina, those 2 teams are the worst teams in the Sun Belt. So they've struggled with some mediocre to bad teams, Appalachian State has. Their top player, Jalen Moore, the running back, last year's Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year, may not play. He's been dealing with injuries all year. And UMass has lost all 6 of their games this year by 10 or less. And they've scored 105 points in their last 2 games. Plus, it's their final home game. So all that to me sounds like UMass might be able to pull up the upset plus the 5. I'll take the Minutemen, and that will do it. So we hope we have been very helpful to you with all of the trends and injury updates and odds and picks and all of that. We're doing really well, by the way. If you take a look at our picks report that we post up, always available on usually Friday nights or Saturdays. If you follow our formula, right now we are plus 1,700. So we're doing a really good job with our college football plays this year. That includes the money line plays. So check that out, our official report before the games tomorrow, including our futures report. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. We'll see you next Friday for Week 10 coverage. And don't forget for NFL Week 8 coverage, check out our show from yesterday with Tony Mejia. All the games we previewed for Week 8. So thanks for tuning in to the Ourlads Football Radio Network right here on the Prime Sports Radio Network. That's our production partner. And again, you can check out all of the shows on demand at Ourlads.com, plus under Prime Sports Network on our YouTube and on our iTunes pages. So we'll see you on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock with our fantasy coverage with Jamal Murphy. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time.